Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 13, Episode 155. I am Dave Bryan from SteelersDepot.com, and joining me once again with Alex Kozora, still on vacation the rest of this week, sitting in for him again today, are Josh Carney and Jonathan Heitritter, who were on the Tuesday show with me, and we've got a couple of interesting topics to talk about in this show. So with that, greetings, Josh and Jonathan. Thanks for joining me again.
Thank you for having us back on. Certainly appreciate it.
Good to be back, as always. I love talking Steelers football, and I love talking it with you guys. Let's get after it.
Yeah, let's get after it here. Okay, we'll start with kind of the obvious kind of newsy news stuff, and most of it I covered during the Wednesday solo show, dedicated a whole 30 minutes to talking about the Steelers signing Alex Highsmith to a 4-year extension, went over a lot of the the preliminary numbers in that. Now we are a little full disclosure here. We are recording this Thursday evening here, and as of right now, the official structure and numbers and layout of the Highsmith contract have still not come in. Hopefully Friday morning or Friday afternoon, maybe we'll have those numbers and all. But I think I gave a pretty good outline of overall what to expect with that deal, the way the structure is, cap charges and all like that. So we won't spend a lot of time talking about the actual deal here at the top of the show, but initial thoughts on the extension for Highsmith. And Josh, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I love it. I know that this was expected. And once again, Dave, you are a wizard. You kind of nailed this back in, what was that, March or April? You wrote that preliminary contract projection between 15 and what was it, 17.25 million. And sure enough, it's right in there. But no, I love this deal for Alex Highsmith. It's one that he certainly deserves. He is the classic Steelers story of, a player development guy, a guy that they got in a draft, sat for a year, worked his way up into a starting role and seized upon his opportunity. And I am very happy he's going to be a Steeler opposite TJ Watt for the next 4 years. I think when healthy, those two are a very formidable duo, and it's very clear that the Steelers are building around that defensive front, and they get a young piece that still seems to be ascending. So I have no qualms with this deal. This is a guy who last year really seemed to come into his own as a run defender and as a pass rusher. He has a deep pass rush arsenal. I think you'll see that week after week when you watch the All-22, some of the moves that he hits. He's a fun player, and he feels like that next generation of key Steelers on and off the field. So no surprise that this got done. Very happy it got done when it got done, because we don't have to worry about any silly hold-in stories moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Kudos to Omar Khan once again for getting this done, ahead of training camp. So that way we're not talking about any kind of a hold in and wondering how long this is going to take. It seems like now, obviously last year they had Deontay, and that ran into training camp, and I think Boswell a little bit into training camp as well too. But those kind of got done at the early stages there. It seems like if Omar has his druthers and can get it done now, this seems to be, in other words, it doesn't seem like a one-off kind of situation now. This seems like it's going to be the trend moving forward, to do everything they can do to get these extension candidates done before they get to training camp. Jonathan, you obviously been connected to the site and this situation for quite a while as well too. I would imagine you weren't overly surprised whatsoever when this news broke.
No, definitely not. And in the words of Mike Tomlin, it's kind of football justice in a way. And Alex Kozora wrote a little bit of a story while he was on staycation or vacation about, his payday being a true success story for Alex Highsmith, starting out as a zero-star recruit, being a walk-on at Charlotte, and just like not only the player that he became, but also the person that he became. You know, his dad's very interactive on Twitter and things like that. And you just see like the player and the family, that aspect that he has. He's just a class act and everything that he does. The way he was going to OTAs, mini camp, and everyone's asking, oh, he's going to just kind of do like a hold in or anything like that. And no, he went in, he did his work the same way he did when he was in high school, when he went to Charlotte, and then when he got to the NFL. And that's something that the Steelers love to reward in terms of players that come in, do the due diligence that they need to, do the work, and be able to continue to develop like Alex Highsmith did, while doing it with a smile on their face. And, you know, Omar Khan did the right thing in terms of making sure to reward him and making him like tied for 10th in terms of pass rushers or outside linebacker or, you know, edge defender being paid in the NFL. And that's the cool thing when you also think about Alex Highsmith's progression, like how he started out behind Bud Dupree and TJ Watt as a rookie. Then he was a starter in his second year, got 6 sacks, and then how he blew up for 14.5 sacks and 5 forced fumbles last year. And now going into this next year, you look at his progression and how last year his sacks kind of came in waves or bunches. Like he would have multiple 2 or 3 sack games, but then there'd be points in time where he would be quiet. So I think the next progression for him is not only continue to working on his arsenal, becoming stronger with his bull rush, but also just being more consistent as like a sack artist on a game-to-game basis, kind of like what we've seen with TJ Watt. And you can say that he's continually on the ascent because look at his time in college. He played out of position as a 3-4 defensive end for a majority of his time at Charlotte. And then he finally blew up his final season when they actually played him as like a outside linebacker, defensive end, outside pass rusher. So if you think about it, he's only really played that position now going on 4 total seasons. So as he continues to develop and continues to get it more exposure and more experience, that means, you know, the sky's only the limit for him. And having a guy like that opposite of Watt, offenses are going to have to be scared and have to plan for that on a weekly basis when they play Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I tell you, he's the poster boy now that you make sure everybody in the organization, once you draft a kid or an undrafted free agent, you make sure they know the Alex Highsmith story. I can remember clear as day talking to Tom Mead about him ahead of the the Shrine Bowl, right?
Yes, it was. Yep.
That year. And, you know, and Jonathan, you hit on, I mean, this is a guy that really, you know, moved all around at Charlotte because of necessity as far as position goes. And then, you know, you get to the Shrine game and, you know, he's got the kind of the measurables. And anyway, you know, he was instantly on Tom Mead's radar. Obviously, fast forward, the Steelers drafted him that year. You know, he got his feet wet, obviously, the rookie season behind Bud Dupree. And, you know, kind of the rest is history. And just a good all around kid. And once again, just the kind of things that you want to make sure that you broadcast throughout the organization. This guy's story, you know, kind of rags to riches, really. And now, you know, you're talking about, you know, over $70 million he's scheduled to earn from 2023 to through 2027 there. And Jonathan, you jumped ahead there, and I don't blame you, but Josh, what are some of the things now that he has this deal? Now, what are you looking for? Because what's happened has happened. Now you've gotten paid. What are you looking for out of Alex Highsmith moving forward?
I think Jonathan nailed it. It's that consistency. I know, you know, last year without TJ Watt, you know, depending on where you look, he had 3.5 or 4 sacks. And, you know, I kind of broke that down. And, you know, without Watt over a 17-game season with some of those numbers, he was on a, you know, 8.5 to 10 sack pace, which is decent. But there were some games where he certainly disappeared, and he wasn't alone. You know, the Buffalo game and the Eagles game, those two stand out as his quietest games. So he's got to find consistency, especially when the opponent level is very high. I think obviously it helps when TJ Watt is opposite him and he has one-on-one looks, you know, alongside Cameron Hayward. But consistency is the big thing with him moving forward. He's got to be able to step up when injuries occur around him and still carry that high level of play he has when the front seven is fully healthy. That's really the only thing for me. You know, you could have some gripes about some run defense at times. I think he can be a little over aggressive at times and get, you know, sucked inside and give up the edge. We saw that a few times last year where he kind of, you know, jumped inside there trying to make a play and, you know, teams beat him around the corner. But outside of that, it's really that consistency as a pass rusher. He needs to be able to stack strong week after strong week. Big games are going to happen, but you can't go through that period where, it's 2 or 3 games and you've only got a few quarterback hits, a few pressures, and no sacks. You're paid like a top pass rusher now. I think he's inside the top 10 or right on the fringe at the edge position. So he's got to find that consistency that a lot of those guys in that same category as him have week to week.
Yeah, look, pressure rate probably needs to improve some for sure. But once again, if people stay healthy on that defensive front this year, and if Larry Ogunjobi ends up reverting back to end of 2020 or 2021 Larry Ogunjobi, and if Cam continues to do his thing, and obviously you have Watt up front, we'll see who play. At some point you're probably going to get Keanu Benton on the field, but that front, when healthy, should end up with Alex Highsmith with a lot of one-on-ones with some left tackles, right? So going to be interesting to see with all the attention that Watt's likely to get, and obviously guys like Cowherd, and we'll see what Ogunjobi can bring. I mean, there's going to be a lot of prime situations, I think, here where Alex will go against some left tackles, and you would obviously think too, another year in the system here, another off season to prepare and all like that, probably build his pass rush game up even more, some more counters, but that spin move, man, that's reminiscent of some Dwight Freeney stuff in there. And I thought the speed to power got a little bit better last year. You want to see that take the next step. Obviously you want him to see him take the next step as a run defender, but he's, the trajectory's there and has been there, and you just want it to go up one more level on that trajectory ladder this season.
Yeah, you hit it right on the head. He's going to have a lot of one-on-one matchups. You look back at that Saints game. I think he won, was it AFC Defensive Player of the Week, that game. That was Watt's return to the lineup, and the first time that the Steelers were really fully healthy up front. And he had 2.5, 3 sacks. I think he had a forced fumble. That's the Highsmith that you're paying and hoping to get when everybody's healthy. You mentioned the spin move. I think it's one of the better ones in the game. His ghost rush has been really impressive, just the ability to kind of hit that dip quickly and have these offensive tackles basically punching on air. He just has a deep pass rush arsenal, and it's really impressive to see this guy who went from a walk-on to what he is now, and that's a testament to the work that he's put in. And you mentioned too the speed to power. I think he's definitely it's helped him playing across from TJ Watt, because you can see him kind of pushing the needle just a little bit on where he lines up pre-snap, where he's almost in the neutral zone, and he takes advantage of that speed, and he has a good get off as well. So I definitely think the arrow is pointing up, and I'm glad, like I said earlier, I'm glad he's going to be a Steeler for the next 4 years.
Okay, you knew it was coming. A, you knew the deal was coming. B, you knew what was probably going to come after the deal got done, and that's the narrative that's been the last couple of days that's been circulating. Well, okay, that's all fine and good. They got Alex Highsmith done, but look at how much money this team is spending on a defensive side of football versus the offensive side. Colin Cowherd tried to take that narrative and take a run at and obviously got it circulating out there this morning, Thursday morning on his show there. He tried to compare the Steelers to the Chiefs, and the Chiefs, the way they do business and how they're attacking the offensive side of football with the spending, and how, they just let, other than basically he tried to say other than Chris Jones, they just, draft them or get them cheap and win games that way. Well, that all sounds fine and good in theory there, but remember, you got Patrick Mahomes over there. And obviously that's a very expensive contract. Just a few years ago was the highest paid quarterback in the NFL, still obviously up there on the list as well too. And you got a guy over there at tight end named Travis Kelce, who, depending on who you ask, even though I think the top 3 paid tight end in the NFL right now, arguably the best tight end in the league, at least from a receiving. Really, up there all around as well too. Not the blocker, obviously, that a George Kittle is, but he makes up for it for what he gives you in the passing game. And when you have those two players under contract at expensive contracts, yeah, most of your money is going to be spent on the offensive side of the football. And yeah, you're going to be in a lot of games because of that. So and I'm going to try my best to try to play the devil's advocate here, because other than the three of us just railing on what he had to say. But I'll start with you, Josh. What would be your initial fire back to Colin Cowherd or all these other people that are disgruntled about the spending that the Steelers have done on the defensive side of football versus the offensive side?
Well, I would ask them to actually look at the cost breakdowns. I mean, they have a quarterback on a rookie deal. So, I mean, there's a significant hit right there on who you're going to pay. That's really the difference there. I think the Chiefs offense is roughly like 160, 170 million total. And I think the Steelers is around 100 million or so. Like, the big difference is Mahomes is making, 50 million a year or whatever it is. That's the difference there. They have a quarterback who's won multiple Super Bowls and is, highly compensated. And Kenny Pickett isn't there yet. He's still on a rookie deal. But the pushback for me is, you look at the Steelers roster currently, and even over the last few years when they've become such a high paid defense, where else were you going to spend the money? I mean, you weren't going to lock up guys offensively long-term. They weren't going to give Juju Smith-Schuster a long-term deal. James Conner wasn't going to get a long-term deal. You just look at that offense. Who was getting the long-term deal that was going to take that money away from the defense? And it's not like guys on offense aren't paid. I think they've invested, around $100 million in the offensive line in the last few off seasons with, Chukwuma Okorafor, James Daniels, Mason Cole, Isaac Seumalo. Deontay Johnson got a big deal. Guys on offense, though, Najee Harris has a deal coming up or will be looking for a new deal eventually. Kenny Pickett, like I mentioned, is on a rookie deal. George Pickens is on a rookie deal. Where were you spending the money offensively? You can't get on a team for spending money on the defensive side of the football when a lot of their best players and some of the best players in the league at their position reside on that side of the ball. So that would be my initial pushback, and I'm sure Jonathan has more thoughts on it that we can get into because he wrote the article up. But it feels like Colin Cowherd kind of changes his opinion on this team and their outlook day after day, because I think it was earlier in the offseason he picked them to win the AFC North, and he loves the roster and everything. But now they hand out a big money deal to a pass rusher, and it's, I don't like that philosophy. They're spending too much defensively.
Yeah, and I think even on in that segment on Thursday morning there, he said he likes the roster, likes the coaching staff, stacked roster. I think was even what he said there. And look, the Steelers right now, even if they wanted to pay Kenny Pickett, Najee Harris, or Pat Freiermuth right now, this moment, they can't because of the CBA rules. Those guys have got to play 3 years before you can even extend their contract. So, and they did spend money these last two off seasons on the offensive line. And before I say more about this, Jonathan, can this whole spending thing, or at least the narrative that Colin Cowherd has tried to run with out there on Thursday morning, can you just boil this thing down to one team has a franchise quarterback and the other one's trying to develop a franchise quarterback?
Yeah, kind of basically. I mean, I wrote in the article at one time, Patrick Mahomes was a rookie on a deal. And then at that point, not only did they had Chris Jones, but they had guys like Tyrann Mathieu, Frank Clark, all of which were top earners at their respective positions at like safety, edge, defensive line. Like they had a lot of high paid guys on the defensive side of the ball. But once Mahomes got that contract, they could no longer afford guys like Mathieu. And then eventually Frank Clark didn't produce, so they parted ways with him. But you look at the team that they have around Mahomes. Yes, Mahomes Mahomes covers up a lot of weaknesses. So that's where they can afford to go ahead and invest little money or draft picks or whatever on the defensive side of the football and just be able to build up this wall around Mahomes because they did pay him $450 million to be able to be their franchise quarterback. Whereas with the Steelers, like they got done with Ben Roethlisberger. We finally got that contract off of our books. So that's where we can go ahead and afford to play defensive players like Highsmith, like Minka Fitzpatrick, and be able to pair them up with TJ Watt and Cameron Hayward to be able to have a strong, stingy defense as we have one of the youngest, if not possibly the youngest offense in the entire NFL. Like when you have Kenny Pickett only making like what, $2.5 million technically this year. And Najee Harris is you're technically your highest like skill position guy that's been drafted recently at 3.5 million or whatever. They paid Deontay Johnson like good money. They paid Isaac Seumalo and James Daniels good money. And it's not Pittsburgh's fault that they were able to get those guys for $8 million of annual earnings for those guards rather than giving Joe Thuney 17, 18, whatever he got per year. Like, it's not Pittsburgh's fault that they're going about this way because ultimately they're just working with the cards they've been dealt. They decided to build through the draft with quarterback, with running back, with wide receiver, with tight end. Eventually those guys will have to come up, and like Pat Frymuth, I mean, he's going to be one of the higher paid tight ends in football when you have to pay him. We'll see what happens with the whole Najee Harris contract. We'll see if George Pickens gets to that point eventually in his career. Kenny Pickett's going to be demanding a decent amount of money if he ends up being Pittsburgh's franchise quarterback. Ultimately, and I concluded in the article, ultimately it's going to come down to Mahomes will be in his 30s, Travis Kelce will be long retired, and then that's when the Steelers are going to be running with that narrative of being a current team paying their offensive players, and then that would basically shove everything back into Colin Cowherd's mouth. So, and the moment in time, yeah, you can go ahead and run with that narrative, but that narrative is always constantly changing in today's NFL. I think the moment in time phrase that you just used right there is something that obviously he didn't take into account either, because I bet Colin Cowherd couldn't explain the 3-year periods in the CBA where teams have to spend at least 90% of the 3-year total running total in that 3-year span of the salary cap in cash. You have to. There's no way around it. All right. So do you want to spend more than 90? Do you want to say how much more than, let's say, 100% of the cap in a 3-year span do you want to spend? That's all fine and good. You could have a goal to go out there and try to spend well above the 100% of the cap over a 3-year period, but there's going to be this thing called the salary cap that keeps you with it. In other words, this isn't a baseball situation where you can be the Yankees and just go out and buy whatever you want, because there are back-end limitations related to the cap, but especially on a 3-year period like that. And that's why it's set up so you just can't go out there and buy 3 consecutive championships per se because of it there. And when you look at the Steelers, they're obviously at the end of this three-year period, which ends this year, they're going to be probably slightly over 100% in spending in cash versus the cap. And being as how they have to spend that money on something, who are they going to spend it on? And if you reverse engineer this thing all the way back, obviously last year was the second year of the 2-year period. They drafted Kenny Pickett. You go back 3 years in this thing, they drafted Najee Harris. They drafted Pat Frymuth. Within that, those guys, once again, they can't pay those guys right now, even if they wanted to within that. So you're leaving out a big part of the conversation when you don't talk about teams building over a 3-year CBA cycle when it comes to cash and cap, and especially when you're talking about a team that is moved on from their franchise quarterback, such as the Steelers are, and are trying to now build around a franchise quarterback and get him to become a franchise quarterback as soon as possible. I was thinking in my head, okay, how can I be the bad cop in this and somewhat try to support Colin Cowherd's side there? And I started running through my head, well, let's go back and re-engineer some of the drafts starting back in 2021. And then I started doing that in my head. I said, well, wait a minute there.
he's talking about cash. He's not, if you change up the draft of the players, going all the way back to 2021, you're still going to be in the same situation. Whereas, where do you spend the cash on, other than what you have at, the way that they have on the defensive side of football? First, there's no way in hell they weren't going to pay TJ Watt. There was no way in hell they weren't going to pay Minka Fitzpatrick. All right. So, and all those deals have gotten done within this time frame, right? All right. Mm-hmm. So the only other thing I could think of that, you do to maybe flip this thing the way Colin Cowherd wants it to go is, who was the tackle that the Chiefs signed that was the highest paid tackle?
Jawan Taylor.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. So maybe this offseason, instead of drafting a tackle, you go out there, and you would obviously have to top the money that he got, right? And make it attractive to come to your organization instead of the Chiefs. So maybe you go over the top in free agency and you buy a left tackle and spend cash there. All right. Well, that cash is got to come from somewhere this offseason. So what does that mean? You probably don't re-sign, let's say, Larry Ogunjobi, and let's say it prevents you from going out there and spending the cash on a Patrick Peterson. All right. Well, there's two pieces of your defense gone, or that you wouldn't have this offseason in lieu of a starting left tackle. Now, if you went out and bought Jawan for that money, would that have been enough to put this team in a this team's going to compete for a Super Bowl?
No, I don't think so. It feels like a, damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of scenario. Like, I mean, you have those two pieces on defense that are going to be key roles for you, but let's say they pay that left tackle. I don't think that puts them over the top, and I don't think that that's the right spending, for this team. Does a left tackle, or actually, I think Jawan Taylor is going to play right tackle.
Is he? Okay.
In Kansas City. So, yeah, because I think Kansas City signed Donovan Smith to, I think, 1 year, $10 million deal or something like that. I mean, is a tackle really moving the needle as far as, offensive payment structure and all that goes? I don't think so. I think this.
It would help, but I mean, is that going to be is that the piece to put you over the top for the cash? It would help satisfy Colin Cowherd's argument as far as spending more cash. But is that in and of itself going to help in 2023 be the difference in this team, the outlook in them right now as we speak, even as clean of an off season as they have had? It's hard to find them anywhere other than predictions do, the long odds to finish last, or, to finish in the bottom of the division. Is a tackle going out and buying the best tackle in free agency this offseason? Would that be enough to change the whole and flip the odds and everything?
Not if you're the Steelers, no.
No.
I don't think so. And it would cost you on the flip side. People just think that this is monopoly money and all like that, that the cap isn't real, but cash spending and the cap matter. All right. Who else on the offensive side of the football, would you, let's say Colin Cowherd went to Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan he has the secret. he has the secret to winning, and it's spending cash on the offensive side of football. That's the magic bean for all of it. And they got to him before the start of free agency. Where else would they have spent the cash at? And where would it have cost them?
Hypothetically, maybe receiver. The one name that, I know this is going to get taken so far out of context with the people listening, but the only receiver that comes to mind, big money, that maybe would change that narrative if they paid Odell Beckham Jr. Would that have put them over the top? Go and spend money on a big time playmaker for your young quarterback on a cheap deal. But at the same time, Is that what that offense needed? Two high-end, ball-dominant receivers to kind of, in a sense, block George Pickens from getting more targets. I don't think the Steelers could have done this any other way. I mean, they were smart with their moves. They certainly felt good about the tackle class in the draft. They went out and got their guys in free agency and Samalu and Herbig on very affordable deals to shore up the interior. And, they got the Rams to eat, what was it, $5 million of the $10 million owed to Allen Robinson for swapping 7th round picks. I mean, I think they invested enough in their offense. It's just there wasn't those high end splashy deals that, talking heads like Colin Cowherd like. But again, I really think it's that damned if you do, damned if you don't. I mean, look at the Killer B era. How much money was spent on offense there compared to defense? And all the talk was, the Steelers don't have a defense. They've got to build up the defense. Well, and looking forward, okay, let's say you pay Pat Freiermuth. So you're going to have a tight end making what, north of 10 million ballpark just early on. Then what if they pay Najee Harris? Then people are upset that they paid a running back in a fungible market. I mean, it's a lose-lose scenario for them. They spend money offensively and the defense falls apart. And then that's the reason they can't win. And you go back to their identity when they won the Super Bowls in the 2000s. It was a great defense, full of stars, a good running game, and a quarterback on a relatively cheap deal. Obviously, the first one in 2005 was a rookie deal. With a run game. So that I think they're trying to find that again. And will it succeed? We'll see. But I have no issues with how they have spent the money. And there is no magic formula that says, Super Bowl winning teams spend X on offense and X on defense. And it comes out to this magical even balance. And that's what gets you to, championships.
Yeah,
you pay the players.
Right. And jumping back on it too, if you would have paid a couple more offensive players this year in free agency, then you're probably not paying Alex Highsmith. And boy, you're going to have an upset Alex Highsmith this summer, going into the final year of his contract, making 2.7 to whatever it was, 2.7 million this year. And I know everybody's listening and said, well, he signed his rookie contract. It is what it is. But I mean, you're setting the wrong precedent moving forward that, okay, you guys can have, develop each of your first 3 seasons there, and there's going to run a chance that we don't pay you going into your final season. And then you have to worry about possibly wearing a franchise tag, all like that. So I've tried to bad cop this as best as possible but there is no way. Then even going back to, like you said, in 2005, remember they had already paid that defense quite a bit, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because
that's where they had the ability to spend the money on. So they spent the money on that defense. Now, without a doubt, it was a storybook season, right? Getting in the playoffs, but once again, get in the tournament, anything can happen, and that something happened in 2005. Now you fast forward into 2008. Your defense was getting, for the most part, had been paid at that time, right? You were starting to spend money on the offensive side of football, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, and that's theoretically, I think, kind of the situation that the Steelers are in now. This is kind of 2005 for them at this point. They're spending the money on the defensive side of the ball, trying to keep that, knowing that they're going to keep those stars lined up for the next couple of years. And in the meantime, hopefully Kenny and the rest of those, because they've obviously built through the draft these last 3 years here. The goal, or their goal, is to fast track this now, beginning in 2023. Maybe they can do enough this year and have the defense good enough where The defense keeps them in ball games. The offense plays better and wins, a couple of those close games this year. You get into the tournament, and then you try to do a repeat of 2005. But within that, as long as Kenny Pickett makes a nice enough jump, regardless of what happens in 2023, you would like to think that enough would have happened with his progression at that point and the other young players on offense that the Super Bowl window officially opens in 2024, right?
Yeah. And honestly, when you look at it, it's all about roster construction. And Omar Khan is doing the best job possible with it. Cause I'm just going through like over the cap and like the deals that were signed this offseason. Like, would you, as the Pittsburgh Steelers, rather have a guy like Isaac Seumalo for $8 million a season, or a guy like Ben Powers, who signed with the Broncos for almost $13 million a season? Like, Isaac Seumalo is probably one of the more steady guards in football and is probably recognized as probably a more consistent, better overall guard than Ben Powers, and Omar Khan got him for nearly $5 million per season less. Or in the case of trading up to draft Broderick Jones in the first round, you could get a rookie left tackle on a rookie deal, or you could go ahead and spend $17.5 million a season on Mike McGlinchey, or potentially $20 million a season on Jawan Taylor. So you look at it and you see all these positions: quarterback on a rookie deal, you see like a wide receiver on a rookie deal, you see tight end on a rookie deal, you see left tackle on a rookie deal. It's like, ultimately, you're doing a great job in terms of managing your costs, and you're investing in premium positions, especially on the offensive side of the football. And say Kenny Pickett pops off next season. Say Broderick Jones wins the job and shines down the stretch. Say you have a guy like Pat Freiermuth, George Pickens. Say they both push in 900 or 1,000 receiving yards. Colin Cowherd's going to turn around, and then if they get to the playoffs, make a push in the AFC, he's going to turn around and be like, the Pittsburgh Steelers are such a brilliant franchise for getting all these good like people on cost-effective deals, and then it's going to completely flip the whole narrative. So ultimately, like, Omar Khan is doing this right. He's getting good, young, talented players at cost value currently, and managing those costs, and recognizing because he's managing those costs, he can invest and try and build an elite defense.
Now, if you want to go back and look at the Steelers, the 3 or 4 years prior, to Ben's final season, if you want to look at those and say, yeah, but look, they spent all that money on the offensive side of football and what they have to show for it. Sure, that should there be at least one more Lombardi trophy at the facility at this point from prior to 2020? Yeah, there probably should be. Okay. I'll listen to that argument that they didn't do enough with what they had in those later years. But guess what? AB's gone, Le'Veon Bell's gone, that whole line, Pouncey, all of that's gone now. And as much as franchise quarterbacks just don't grow on trees, as we've seen across the NFL. You bought a lottery ticket on Kenny Pickett, and now you're trying to develop that lottery ticket into parlaying that into a Super Bowl window opening for not just 1 year or 2 years. If you have made these right selections, not only with Pickett, but the skill positions around him, and if you've made these right decisions in free agency these last couple of years, then you're talking about that Super Bowl window potentially being open for as long as Kenny Pickett plays, because especially if he becomes one of the top 5, 6, 7 quarterbacks in the NFL, right? Because you're not winning nothing without a quarterback, right?
Absolutely. And I think the thing that I come back with Cowherd's comments, and I will say this, I appreciate him saying, I find myself aligning with the Chiefs and the style of play that they have, and that's why I think that I agree with their the way that they're building. So I appreciate him saying, I'm biased towards this. This is why I feel this way. But like, there's no right or wrong way to win in the NFL financially or stylistically, but you have to have a quarterback. It's that simple. You can look back the last decade or so. I mean, when's the last time a team won a Super Bowl with a non-franchise quarterback, or even reached the Super Bowl with a non-franchise quarterback? You can talk about the Foles a little bit, I guess.
A little bit, yeah. But I mean,
that's really it. That's the only one that comes to mind. But even then, that team was built around, Carson Wentz, and he was having an MVP season, and then Foles just got hot in the playoffs. I mean, again, get into the tournament, see what happens. That's the thing. But you've got to have a franchise quarterback in this league, and if you don't have one, you better have a guy in the system that you think can be one. And when that time comes to pay him, you're going to have to pay him. And I just find it very strange to be criticizing the Steelers for paying guys that they hit on in the draft or via trade, regardless of what side of the football they're on. I mean, if they're not keeping their best players and they're constantly just cycling through draft picks and all that, it hurts the culture and it hurts the ability to build year after year. So I just find it very weird that, granted the NFL is an offensive game nowadays. I just find it very weird though that the Steelers have become the poster team, quote unquote, doing it the wrong way and paying defense in an offensive league.
Yeah, and I think I'll circle this back as we close out this conversation on Cowherd and all like that is the point that Jonathan made a point, and he's taking a point in time here, whereas he really should be looking at this over the last include the 3-year part of the cycle there versus cash versus cap, and obviously second year, starting back in the first year of it being 2021, the drafting of the young players in Najee and Freiermuth, and obviously Pickett the year after that, and still spending money on the offensive side of football on the offensive line, whereas starting to spending the mega bucks of people that really deserve it on the defensive side of football. Him not taking into account the 90% rule and the cash spending and how teams have got to spend the cash on something. I just and I told people on Twitter I was going to try to be the bad cop as best I could, but it was still going to be a flimsy argument. And I think I have shown it that I haven't put up a very good fight to support his side of it. It's just really, really silly overall. And if you understand the business of the NFL and how things work, then you hopefully you see right through that. Mike Florio said something very interesting in his conversation on 93.7 The Fan day before yesterday, something along the lines of, all 32 teams go into the season saying that they think they have built enough and done enough to win the Super Bowl that year, but that the Steelers are probably the only team that honestly believes that. I've said that to Alex, and Alex and I have had the same conversation. I honestly believe that. I believe that every year, Mike, or last couple, at least, Colbert on into Omar Khan, that they honestly believe every offseason that they have done everything within their power to give them a chance to compete for a Super Bowl. Do you agree or disagree?
I agree, and I think a lot of that, in the last decade or so, was largely propped up by having, again, that franchise quarterback in Ben Roethlisberger. But I think
now should they have won in the late teens?
Yes.
Should there be at least another Super Bowl trophy in the cupboard right now?
I think, 100%. I think 2017 was that year, and then Shazier gets hurt, and again, that defense was so thin because all that money was spent on the offense. And next thing you know, Blake Bortles is dropping 45 points at Heinz Field. But yeah, I think that the Steelers truly believe that. And I think in the last 2 off seasons, they have every right to believe that, especially this offseason. I think that they were impressed with what Kenny Pickett showed down the stretch in the second half, not only Pickett, but the offense. And, they as Jonathan said, they had some very good bargain signings in free agency that I don't want that to sound like a negative connotation. These are very good players that they landed for very affordable deals. And I think that they believe they have addressed every hole on the roster as best as they can, and they have a championship caliber team to hit the field.
Jonathan, what does any kind of a run into the playoffs? Because look, the way you're going to measure this season is can they get back in the playoffs, and more importantly, they've got to get at least one playoff win. If you don't do that, then it's going to be deemed, in my opinion, an unsuccessful season. But what what will this 2023 season look like for such a scenario to play out, for this team to make the playoffs and win at least one playoff game and maybe more?
Well, they got to be, again, you're paying your defense, so your defense has to be absolutely dominant. I mean, you have to have everyone stay healthy, TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, Cam Hayward, Minkah Fitzpatrick, all those guys stay healthy. And they got to return to that team that leads the league in sacks and just puts relentless pressure on opposing offenses. They have to be able to generate turnovers, and not only turnovers and takeaways, but be able to do kind of like what the 2002 Bucks team was known for in terms of taking a couple of those turnovers and taking them, making them touchdowns. So they really need to dominate on that side of the ball in terms of making sure things they keep a lid on things defensively so other teams don't try and outscore them. And then offensively, obviously they need to embrace that bully ball run mentality, and they have, frankly, the offensive line to do it now that as they built it up. They have the running back in Najee Harris and a good second back in Jaylen Warren in order to establish that presence in the ground game. But frankly, again, like we've always been pointing to, it's all on Kenny Pickett. Can Kenny Pickett make this offense a well-rounded offense that can beat you on the ground as well as through the air? Can this team attack the middle of the field? Can this team attack teams down the field vertically? Can this team be able to get in the red zone and finish drives, not only just with field goals, but with touchdowns? They have all the weapons to do it. They have the receivers. They have the tight ends. They have everything that they need. Can they have it where they successfully put points on the board? We're going to see if Kenny Pickett's up for the challenge. We're going to see if Matt Canada can finally bring this offense to fruition. But that's what you need to see. And frankly, I'm more excited to see what this passing game looks like, because based off of everything, if the offensive line stays healthy and Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren do what they're supposed to do, this should be a good running game based off of what we saw last year. And then you add guys like Isaac Seumalo and Broderick Jones. But when you have the weaponry that Pickett has, like it's probably an underrated overall skill position room when you have guys like Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, Allen Robinson, Calvin Austin III. You have Pat Freiermuth, you have Darnell Washington, you have Connor Hayward. You have a lot of weapons at your disposal and a lot of guys that can beat you a lot of different ways. They need to be able to beat teams through the air, not in the last drive of the game like they had against the Raiders and the Ravens, but consistently through 4 quarters, be able to drive down the field and put the ball in the end zone for touchdowns.
Okay, let's say their defense is what it's supposed to be, and that should probably be a top 5 defense across the board. Top 6 maybe at worst there against the run and the pass. Can they win enough games with Kenny Pickett throwing 17 to 20 touchdown passes? Is it doable if your defense is a top 5, 6 defense in the NFL? Josh?
Oh, yeah. 100%. I think so, especially with the style of play that they want to do on offense. They're going to lean on that run defense, what we think it can be. Move forward. This takes a step forward and then builds off that second.
You're bouncing in and out a little bit there, Josh. I don't know if you got a dead area of the house. Sorry,
no. I definitely think they're capable of winning a lot of games with Pickett throwing just 17 to 20 touchdowns. That's just the style of play that they want to play. I don't think it's going to ask him to do more than that. And if the defense is what we think it is, it's a winning formula.
All right. Let's move. Obviously, training camp gets underway next week. And, man, next Friday, Alex and I will be doing the first training camp nighttime podcast and all. We will obviously have you guys on, I think, before the start of the season to get your thoughts on the way the season's shaping up, predictions and all like that. But prior to training camp getting underway, each of you, give me like 3 or 4 key things you're looking maybe to learn in training camp this year, and 3 or 4 players that you're very intrigued about seeing. And obviously Kenny Pickett's going to be one of those for the obvious reasons, and some of these rookies and all. But kind of off of the main path, who are some of those guys you're really interested to see in training camp, and tell me a couple of the things that you're really looking to learn overall in training camp. I'll start with Jonathan on this.
Yeah. So one of the guys and like kind of one of the big topics that I'm really looking forward to with the training camp is the state of Pittsburgh's, when they go nickel or dime and their state of the slot defender, what they're going to do there. They've obviously have added Patrick Peterson coming in with Levi Voss, drafted Joey Porter Jr. You figure those are like their top three options on the outside. Now, does Peterson kick into the slot? Like they've mentioned, he's moved around, or do they have it where they keep still one of those other guys off the field and they roll with either say, Shannon Sullivan, a Duke Dawson and Elijah Riley. Honestly, the guy that I'm like interested to see who like contributes in that way during the preseason as well as in training camp is Shannon Sullivan, because, based off of Pro Football Focus's like advanced analytics last season with the Vikings, like he did not look good. He did not look good in terms of his coverage ability. But I also like to take that in terms of frame of context, just because the Vikings defense overall struggled mightily last year. And then you look at what he did when he was with the Green Bay Packers. And I've consulted a lot of other Packers fans that I've talked to. And they said, you know what, he was a very underrated player for us in our secondary. Obviously, we have guys like, Adrian Amos was there. They had, Jair Alexander. But Shannon Sullivan was kind of that unsung guy that, came in and made plays. So are you going to get more of a Shannon Sullivan that, made splash during his time in Green Bay, or Shannon Sullivan that, had really bad moments last year with the Vikings and didn't really add a lot of whole splash plays to that? I think he's a guy that, is experienced. He's a willing tackler. He's made plays in the past in the passing game. I think that he's a cheaper version of what you could possibly get, still out there. I wrote about, Bryce Callahan and other options that are out there, but he is younger, kind of fitting that mold of what Steelers want to do on the defensive side of the football with free agents. So I think that Omar Khan and the rest of the front office and the coaching staff are going to be looking at him and just being like, okay, can this guy be that quality slot defender for us? Depending if we're going to be putting Peterson in there in certain situations or not. But Shannon Sullivan is one guy that I am very intrigued to see if he can kind of play up to that billing as being a starting slot player, or if he's a guy that's more like what happened last year with the Vikings, and it's just like, yeah, this guy is more of a rotational or backup kind of guy.
Yeah. Who else? Josh, who else are you looking forward to seeing, and what kind of overview?
I think for me, the one guy I really want to see, at least early on, we've heard a lot of great reports about Allen Robinson and how he's looked in OTAs and minicamp. I want to see him up close in person, see how he's moving compared to how he looked in the last few years. Like I said, the reports early on have been very high on him. I want to see how he looks now that he's had some more time to digest the playbook and develop that rapport, with Kenny Pickett. But outside of that, I kind of want to see just overview how this offense looks in year 3 under Canada. I don't think we're going to see truly what this offense looks like early on in camp, as they install a lot of stuff and kind of hit the ground, at a slow pace to get everybody going again. But I want to see if they utilize the middle of the field more. I want to see the types of routes that Deontay Johnson is running, see if George Pickens has a little bit more of a refined route tree. And I want to see how this left side of the line looks, whether it's Dan Moore and Isaac Seumalo or Broderick Jones and Isaac Seumalo. I want to see what they do with Nate Herbig. So I've got my eyes on the offense. I think even with the amount of new faces defensively, I know what style they want to play. I know, I feel like I know what style they want to play. I feel like I know, what looks they're going to get defenses and what they're going to ask some guys to do. But the offense just feels really unknown. And I want to see what some of those guys look like in another year under Canada. And I really want to see if those early reports on Robinson are true, or if they were just the guys kind of seeing things, through rose-colored glasses and seeing a big name wide receiver 3 on the field for the first time in a while for the Steelers.
Yeah, I think, obviously Calvin Austin finally getting on the field back in training camp again will be fun to see, and how they utilize him. The thing with Allen Robinson is, never been a big yards after the catch guy, so maybe he can do a little bit more than what he's done in the past there. And, obviously you want to see, as kind of you both mentioned there, use of the middle of the field a lot more. And as Alex and I have talked several times, we've got to see the yards after the catch go up on this team this year. No matter how that happens, and normally that's going to come by getting the football to guys out in space and the ability to run. You'd like to think that Kenny Pickett will have a little bit more autonomy, not only in game planning, but just, things he likes on offense and willing to expand on as well. How much of that will actually, Alex and whenever, Josh, you're going to go a time or two, we'll actually see. And obviously things during the, preseason is going to be a lot more vanilla. I don't think we're going to, the takeaways usually that I get coming out of preseason games is just individual play more than anything when it comes to that. Any other, kind of fringe roster players that you're thinking, maybe this guy can surprise and jump on the roster?
I keep coming back to Armon Watts. I think he's going to make the roster, so I don't think it's a jump onto the roster. But, in the last week or so, I've kind of just been going back and watching some of his Bears tape, and I've been intrigued by some of the stuff he can do. And I'm kind of curious to see how they view him. He can play, some of that. He can play some nose tackle. He can be that 3-4 defensive end. He's shown a little bit as a sub-package pass rusher at times in his time with, I think, Minnesota and Chicago. So I'm curious to see how they deploy him and if he is that guy that's next in line behind a Larry Ogunjobi and a Cam Hayward as that rotational piece. So I think he's got some intriguing tape, and I'm interested to see what his role is early on in Pittsburgh.
Jonathan, any other kind of fringe guy that you think, I'm more bullish on this guy than maybe Dave and Alex are or Josh is that I'm really interested to see through training camp and the preseason?
Some guys that kind of come to mind for me are the linebackers behind the projected starters in terms of Cole Holcomb and Landon Roberts. When you have guys like Tanner Muse and Nick Kwiatkowski, I believe that's how you say it, just being added here this offseason. And yeah, Muse is more of that special teams ace kind of guy that you add just be able to make up for the loss of special teamers that they've had this offseason. But then, Kwiatkowski's actually had a lot of starting experience, last with his tenure with the Bears as well as with his time with the Raiders as well too. He was with the Falcons last year, but really didn't play a whole lot. So is he kind of more of this guy that you're going to be able to have out there as your linebacker 3, or is Mark Robinson kind of have that role, or is he just more of this, depth kind of guy? But the tape's out there. He's kind of very similar to that Robert Spillane player that played a lot for Pittsburgh just because he was consistent. He was steady. He wasn't the best athlete in the world, but he came in and he made plays. And I see Nick Kwiatkowski as a very similar type of player. Ultimately, we'll kind of see how this linebacker room shakes out. I mean, it's not giving me a whole lot of confidence. And it kind of seems like, same process, but just a different group of players. But I think Kwiatkowski is kind of a guy that's kind of being kind of forgotten around with, the other names of Holcomb, Roberts, Mark Robinson. And I think he's a guy that, could probably end up making the roster, and not only making the roster, but making a solid contribution on defense.
Alex is very bullish on Mark Robinson. I obviously, from what I saw, I liked what I saw last year, but I think people forget that, he only played in 4 games, and what was it, 40 something defensive snaps in total. And 2 of those 4 games were the final 2 games of the season. Obviously he made waves last year during the preseason and all like that. I guess I wrote him up just recently on the on my 90-30 series. This is going to be a bit blasphemous overall to ask this question, I think, especially to most of the listeners, because he's a highly liked guy. A lot of people think that the Steelers potentially have a gem in him, and they might possibly have. To me, the books. I've got to see more on Mark Robinson yet, personally. And where I'm coming from, that's going to make this so blasphemous is Is there any chance whatsoever that Mark Robinson does not make this 53-man roster?
I think there's a chance. I think it's a very, very low chance. But I mean, we're talking about a former 7th-round pick who only played between 40 and 50 defensive snaps last year, still has a lot of developing to do.
Terrell Austin didn't sound very bullish on him during the offseason. And that's only one sound clip. Probably there might have been a message in there for, just not wanting the kid to get, full of himself and yada, yada. And once again, I don't hate the kid. I mean, from what we've seen so far, especially going back to last preseason, there were things to like. But we are talking about a kid here that was a converted running back, into linebackers last season at Ole Miss, comes into the NFL, only dresses for 4 games. 2 of them at the end of the season there, only played 44 defensive snaps in total there. Heck, we don't even really know we think he's going to be at worst, going to be a very good special teamer, but he only played 16 special team snaps last year for this team. Jonathan, and look, and don't give me an answer, you guys know better to try to pacify me or whatnot. I mean, is there any threat of him not making this roster?
I think you just look at it in the development side of things, just because he is so raw. Because he's played very minimal snaps as a rookie. He was only a 1-year player at Ole Miss at linebacker, because he was previously a running back before that. And for me, I kind of look at his role, he kind of gives off that, Vince Williams thumper type of role, which is good because Pittsburgh needs, those guys that can come downhill, play against the run. And he did that against, the Ravens and the Browns. But if he's not able to continue to develop in terms of his instincts, and you see those instincts slow during the preseason, as well as being able to show that he can be adequate in coverage, I think, he can be as aggressive as he wants to. He can be a bull in a china shop if he wants to. But if his instincts aren't there, if he's a complete liability in coverage, then, and you have guys like Kwiatkowski, Tanner Muse, all these other guys playing him, potentially he's a guy that you could see get cut and, try and get relegated back to the practice squad. I'm with Josh. I don't think that it's going to happen. I think that there's a good chance that, he'll stick, and then he might be a game day inactive. He continues to sit in the system a little bit longer. But I think the instincts as well as coverage, in order to be a linebacker that can adequately see the field, he needs to show those things and show development on those things going into year 2 versus his rookie season. And if he doesn't, that's when you can kind of be like, okay, he may be on thin ice potentially.
I think too, if there is a veteran linebacker that the Steelers have had their eyes on that becomes available, whether it's after, final cuts or, a Joe Schobert type trade, all bets are off with Mark Robinson, in my opinion. This isn't a guy that I would sit here today and say he's a stone cold lock for the roster. Again, we're talking about a 7th-round pick who has less than 70 career snaps on defense and special teams in the NFL. This isn't a guy that they invested heavily in and, he's going to get the 4 years to figure it out. It's a 7th-round pick. They took a flyer on him. They certainly liked him. Brian Flores kind of pounded the table for him, and Flores is now out the door. I can't see it happening this year. But again, if there is a guy that becomes available at the end of training camp ahead of week 1 and the Steelers go to get him, it wouldn't shock me if Mark Robinson's that guy that loses a spot.
Here's the thing that kind of threw me off a little bit. Look, I understand the Tanner Muse addition and all like that, because that guy's got some athleticism, can play on special teams and break glass in case of emergency. You can throw him out there on the defensive side of football. Obviously, we hope we don't never see him on the defensive side of football. This team obviously went out and got Holcomb and Landon Robertson, and those are going to be your two primary guys there. I guess kind of what threw me off a little bit is, really what was, other than him being cheap and also being a decent special teams player for his age, what was the reason to go out and get Nick Kwiatkowski? Other than just fortifying your depth in case of injuries and all like that, which once again, Yeah, sign me up for as many guys you want to bring in on veteran benefit contracts, and that might be all it is, because quite honestly, it could end up being an either or between Muse or Kwiatkowski, whichever one shows enough on defense and obviously be able to be that core special teams player. But then again, we just had the conversation the other day about what are the Steelers' top needs in the 2024 draft, and I think if you asked any Steelers fan listening to this right now, give me 3 positions the Steelers need to draft early in the 2024 draft. Inside linebacker is probably going to be one of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you got Holcomb on a 3-year deal. You're hoping he's going to play more than 1 year. Assuming that happens, assuming Holcomb is the guy you thought he could be right out of the chute in 2023. Let's say a Landon Roberts just ends up being another one of the, a one and done there, and you go out and draft another guy next year. Where does Mark Robinson fit in all that?
It's a great question. Your concerns and questions are valid here. I mean, honestly, I don't think he's ever going to be a Mac in this Steelers defense. I don't think he has the chops to be that 3-down linebacker. So I think he's kind of pigeonholed into that Buck role. And I mean, if they're going out to draft a linebacker next year, it's probably going to be in the 1st or 2nd round. I would be stunned if it's past that they invest in the position. They might dip into free agency again as well. So Mark Robinson, I mean, it's a cloudy picture for him. And I think Terrell Austin's comments earlier in the offseason certainly raised some eyebrows of, well, we hope he can compete for a starting job in 2024. I mean, the hope was he might be able to push a guy like Roberts, at some point this season, but I'm not sure what's going on there. I know he's got a lot of developing to do, but I think that it's a murky future outlook for Robinson, to say the least.
And maybe he can, maybe he can push Roberts,
right?
And maybe he can. But my whole thing when it comes to Mark Robinson, I'm not down on it. People are going to take this. Oh, Dave's down on Mark Robinson, a 7th-round draft pick. No, I haven't seen enough of him to form a good enough opinion on him overall. Alex, on the other hand, Alex feels like he has, and Alex really thinks Mark Robinson can take it to the next level. And I think Alex might, has said, was really wanted to. We all wanted to find out really the context of what Austin said, and we did kind of get that clarified, that he was thinking that not this year, maybe next year, and that kind of threw me for a loop a little bit. And once again, look, that might have been said just to fire Mark Robinson up a little bit more, just to kind of make him kind of question whether or not his roster spot was safe or something along those lines. My thought on, circling this back to training camp and the preseason is, I can't wait to see Mark Robinson because I want to see more snaps out of him. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I don't think you're alone there. I think Jonathan was pretty high on him last training camp, and certainly that stretch to close the year, there were some flashes. There were also some black eyes in a sense on some plays where he was very clearly taken advantage of. But yeah, he's a guy. I mean, that has to be Aaron Curry's kind of pet project early on, in my opinion.
All right, go ahead, Jonathan. Mop it up.
I would agree. With Mark Robinson, it's just, the draft capital behind him. They didn't invest much into him. He's kind of limited in what he can be, like Josh said, in terms of that buck. He can come out, like, I think he made like an interception or something on Kenny Pickett, and everyone's raving about it on Twitter when it happened during OTAs or something like that. But he's got to come out. He's got to really show out in training camp. He's got to show out in the preseason. He's kind of have to be that camp darling per se again. And that's where I think he can play himself maybe into a niche role. I don't know if he'll ever be a full-time starter, whether it be at the buck position or not. But I think that based off of everything that is going, maybe against him, as well as the potential to bring in like people of a higher draft status or a more high pedigree free agent, he really has to be able to, dot his I's and cross his T's and make sure that he makes a big impact and a big impression here this year in Pittsburgh before potentially getting buried down the depth chart.
Look, I hope he makes it hard on him this summer and pushes, Landon Roberts for that other spot. And then obviously goes on and has a great 2023 season, because the byproduct of that would obviously put less onus on, spending one of your first 3 draft picks in 2024 on the position. So there'd be nothing better than for them to have kind of a Vince Williams part 2, if you will, late round draft pick that people kind of view as a throwaway that ends up, being a guy that ends up starting and being a key cog in your defense for 7-8 seasons or whatnot. So, but my whole contention is I want to see more of him this summer here. And that's the guy that I'll have my eye on. Okay, 45 minutes in, we're going to spend the next 45 minutes talking about Madden ratings.
Please, no.
No.
Kendrick Green having a 71 is ridiculous.
I think you're the only one that plays that game, Josh.
Yeah, and my time is running short.
And I wonder how many people about went off the road when I said we're going to spend the next 45 minutes talking about Madden ratings. But I know I'm with you guys at this point. I'm tired about list. I'm tired of Madden ratings. I'm tired of will the Steelers trade for player X and all like that. All of the typical usual offseason stuff at this point is kind of run its course. We still have the NFL top 100, I guess, is going to get fired up here pretty soon at the start of camp, but at least camp will be underway and all like that. Soon we can actually start talking about football again, starting the end of next week there. So, all right. That's enough, I think, for this show. I think we got, an hour and 15 minutes out of this one overall. Guys, I appreciate you sitting in for Alex Kozora on 2 shows this week. Once again, we will have both of you back on, probably with several other guys as well, too, right ahead of the 2023 season starting, to talk about, kind of expectations for this team, where they're going and all like that. Jonathan, your Twitter handle is what is it? By John Carney. No, Josh Carney, right? By Josh Carney.
Yeah, by Josh Carney. Yep.
And Jonathan, yours is J_Heights, Heits. My browser just crashed on me, so I don't have it open right now. But I believe it's J_Heits, correct?
Correct. That is correct.
All right, guys, once again, I appreciate you sitting in for Alex this week on 2 shows here, and you'll be back on here in the near future again. In the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex on Twitter at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the donate button up right navigational bar. Alex will be getting his training camp reports underway next week. So look forward to that. Also going to have those nightly podcast training camp wrap-up episodes starting late next week as well, too. So an exciting time of year. And as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex. And tonight, Josh Carney and Jonathan Heitritter.